Hi, everyone. I know folks are just coming back from break, so we're still muted on the line, just FYI. We will be starting in just a couple of minutes.
Hey, this is Jeff Gore. I just wanted to see if my mic was working.
Yes, we can hear you, Jeff.
Okay, good. Since it wasn't working earlier, I wanted to check.
No problem. Okay, do we have Tom in the room yet?
Yes, I'm here, Hema.
Okay, great. When 3:30 hits, I will just open things up and turn it over to you.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back to the committee. Thanks everyone for joining us for the last part of the day. We certainly hope that the panels that we had set up earlier today gave you kind of EPA 101. There was a lot of information. We were hoping that by the end of the day, you would all walk away with a broader understanding of some of the programs and the priorities at EPA that may be relevant for the issues and the questions that you undertake as a committee, and just relevant for agriculture and rural communities in general. So we hope that we succeeded in that mission and that you got to know a little bit about our leadership as well. So at this point in the agenda, we just have a little bit more to go today. Because there's no public comments session, we're going to be adjourning at a little bit earlier than originally planned at 4:30, but still per the agenda that we had sent out, and that's Eastern Daylight Time, of course. So the session that we're in now is going to be run until 4:15 p.m. and it's just a general committee discussion for you all to be able to reflect on the charges as your initial impressions and your initial questions, and for, you know, just to get a little bit of thinking going before we break for the day and we reconvene tomorrow to really dig in on the charge. But before we do that, we'll also have an opportunity to vote on the bylaws that that were circulated for the committee, the operating procedures. So I'm going to turn it over to our chairman, Tom McDonald, at this time. So Tom, I think we have your feed.
All right. Thank you, Hema. So at this time, we need to consider the bylaws that you should have received either in your packet that was mailed to you from EPA, or they've been emailed several different times. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adopt the Farm, Ranch, and Rural Communities Advisory Committee bylaws.
This is Dave Graybill, so moved.
This is Amy Wolf, I second.
All right. It has been moved and seconded that we adopt the Farm, Ranch, and Rural Community Advisory Committee bylaws. Is there any discussion on the bylaws? We received a draft version soon after, I guess, right at orientation, and made several comments that EPA addressed. So are there any further comments on the bylaws as mailed? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote on the bylaws. This will be a voice vote. And so if everyone would unmute your line so we make sure we get everybody's vote. All of those in favor of adopting the bylaws, please say aye.
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 All those opposed to adopting the bylaws, please say no. The ayes have it. The Farm, Ranch, and Rural Communities Advisory Committee bylaws are adopted. Thank you very much for that. So now then, we will move into our general discussion about the committee charge topics. The thing that I wanted to do this afternoon was to have some general discussion. Ask clarifying questions. I think Carrie, are you still with us?
I believe Carrie had to step away from her computer for momentarily, but she will be back later.
Okay. Anyway, if you do have questions, it would be good for you to get those on the table. And if we don't have the people to answer the questions, we can certainly take your questions down, and hopefully even by tomorrow we can have some of the answers. Again, today it's not the time that we're going to jump in and try to solve the problems. That's the initial reaction from a group of technical professional folks like this. We want to just solve it right quick. But today, let's think about things like what you don't understand about the topics. What data do we need to adequately address the topic? Are there speakers that could present useful information about a topic? Are there examples that demonstrate success around a question topic or something similar to a question topic?
So Tom, this is Jeanette. I thought maybe we could start with structure.
Okay.
And I think everybody's just sort of wanting to know if we're going to be an ad hoc or how we're going to address these different committees. And then I think from there we could dive deeper into everything you just mentioned.
Yeah. So, and we can certainly discuss this, but what I plan to do is before we adjourn tomorrow, I will ask each of the committee members what general area you're interested in working in. And I envision having 3 ad hoc working groups. One to address the holistic pesticide topic, and one to address water and wastewater topics, water quality and water quantity that is laid out in our topics, and then one to address the food waste question, food waste, food loss. And again, we can talk about if we want to put sidebars around that or how we want to address that. The other thing that I think it would be interesting, you know, if there are things related or even unrelated that you think the committee should have the opportunity to respond to or provide recommendations to, certainly putting those items on the table today would be a good time. So I guess my thought is we will do a lot of the background, just getting clarification around the topics and for this meeting, and then in the meeting, by establishing ad hoc working groups, and then ask the ad hoc working groups to get together once or twice before our next meeting so that we can have people start thinking about what information, further information needs we have, how we're going to actually address the topic, and probably kick off the next meeting with a report out from the ad hoc working groups. So with that, I will listen and moderate. I don't know it. We'll see how this goes. If you have thoughts, questions, anything that you want to bring up, let's start out by just unmuting your line and speaking. And if we have people walking on each other, we can use the chat box to establish our order.
Yes, and Tom, this is Hema. I just wanted to add one thing. We understand that there were some requests for some additional information about some of the programs that that are addressed in the charge or referred to in the charge that EPA has. And so we will be circulating, we're just updating the document, the charge document, with some hyperlinks to some of the EPA programs that were highlighted earlier in the day. And we'll circulate that updated version at the end of today. And for members of the public, just a reminder, we will be posting all materials, final materials, to the website. But the charge document in particular, because we're tweaking it today based on what's needed for the discussion tomorrow, we will be posting a version of the charge to the website so that the public can view it as well. Just wanted to make a note of that because I know that there has been some requests to see the charge. So okay. Just go ahead and open floor for you to lead. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Hema.
This is Beth. I have a question. I'm curious how EPA sees. How do you know when public trust is there? What are you guys looking for to know that you've hit the mark, and indeed that the public truly believes there's a really robust scientific process behind what you're doing in these areas? I guess it's especially mentioned in pesticides. And that when a product is out, people trust that it's safe to use, according to the label at least. Kind of like, what does success look like?
Yeah, yep, that's a good question. Hema, is there anyone from EPA that could help with that?
At this time, we're taking note of these types of questions. I think that's an excellent question. And in fact, I think it's something that could either be discussed moving forward with the committee, or it could also be part of what the committee offers and feedback on what success could look like, right? But at this time, I'm just taking notes, and I'll discuss with my team, and if we're able to offer any additional insight about what the administrator had in mind, or if there's anything specific that leadership had in mind, we'll certainly do that tomorrow.
I guess the converse of that is, and I'm not trying to be sort of flippant and asking this question, what is the administrator here or EPA folks here, leadership here, that makes them believe there is lack of public trust, and therefore in the process?
Beth, that may be a good question for tomorrow afternoon to actually ask the administrator.
True, good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think it goes actually out to the question that they were asking us is how they can communicate. And I just think part of the issue is complex material, and the general public may not understand it. And so when they don't understand it, they just, automatically go to the no trust. So maybe that's what we look at as some strategic thoughts on how you break that down, and so that the common person might be able to digest it better.
Yes.
When you get 24-letter words, it's difficult. Tom, did anybody get the charge? Looking through my mail, I'm not seeing it.
I did. Mine came two ways. One was from Hema, and then the other was FRRCC at 9:32. It says FRRCC charge topics.
Okay, let me go back and look. Okay, thank you.
And 9:32 is Mountain Time. I'm sorry. That'll be different.
Jeanette, if you don't see it in your inbox, we can resend it again. But yes, we sent it twice to the committee this morning.
There it is.
Tom?
5:32 a.m. I think I found it. Okay.
I have
Tom, Bill
another.
Kauser.
Bill, yes, sir.
I guess I've got one other topic that's kind of near and dear to, I guess, my Midwestern position here is air quality. Does that need to be a topic of, maybe the fourth topic? It just seems, my wife Nancy was on EPC for 8 years here, and it just seems like it's going to be a subject that we're going to have to address sooner than later, both with science and with technology that we probably don't have in place yet.
Okay.
And I guess I want to make a comment. I don't know how many of this group know that Tom and I sit on an animal ag discussion group inside EPA. And, Tom, when I was listening to some of the, well, especially the introduction of David Ross, I mean, I truly could see David Ross, Andrew Sayer, and Anna pulling a newborn calf. They're teachable. And I want to tell him, I just wanted to tell David that so bad. But I think that animal ag discussion group has been in place for, what, about 6 or 7 years now, Tom?
Yeah.
And that's another asset or group that we can pull from that is very well conversed with EPA and the career people in there.
Good point, Dave. Bill, thank you.
Tom, this is Jimmy Kinder.
All right, Jimmy.
Yeah, I've got a question maybe for you, is that you've been through this before. How will these reports be used at the end, as we have an outcome in 2 years? I'm kind of going backwards so I know what we're going to build here. How will those, what we do here today, how will it be used and disseminated in the EPA so that we can make sure that whatever we put together will be useful for them?
Well, that's a good point. And Jimmy, that is another thing that I had on my list that we probably need to discuss with Administrator Wheeler tomorrow, and that is accountability for the agency. We're going to spend 2 years developing recommendations for the agency, and how will the accountability be reported back from the agency? I can tell you from previous times, one of the ways that has happened, and for some of the committee, they may not hear that, but as the committee gets rechartered, we have asked the administrator to report out on how previous recommendations had been incorporated. And did the agency use the recommendation? Did you modify it and do something different, or did you just totally ignore it? And we've actually had administrators kind of do a scorecard and tell us, we've got regional ag advisors in every region. That was one of our recommendations, was to populate the regional advisors, ag advisor positions, and they did that. And so, that's a very good point. And just, I can tell you historically, and I think this administration will be no different. They do listen to our recommendations. I think we've seen their feet move, and EPA is trying to work with agriculture. We have to realize that's a complex system. Just getting this meeting pulled off was a monumental task. So it may not move fast, but looking back over the years, a lot of our recommendations have been taken to heart and put in place.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Tom, this is Jim Zook. So one of the questions that I have as we look at all of this, and we can think about communication to consumers, but we have some other, I guess, other steps before it actually gets to consumers, to them understanding, and that goes to, if a decision is made, the advocate groups that will come in and trounce on whatever decision they make. And then, of course, in part of the decision-making process that EPA has to have, and how will that, I know one of their thoughts is, well, how will we get sued? And so when we come up with all of this, do we need to consider that in part of our recommendations?
So let me make sure I understand your question. Are you asking, we might give EPA a very good recommendation for communicating to the public, but it may never get there because activist group would derail it? Is that kind of where you're going with your question? How do we deal with detractors?
That would be exactly what I'm referring to, because in the decision-making process, they may consider that first before they consider the perception of the public.
Okay, I'm with you. So I think then maybe to refine what I heard is, how is priority given to comments to different, say, a pesticide approval? How does EPA weigh the comments and deal with the detractors' comments to those things?
Precisely, especially on the first charge that we have.
Hey Tom, this is Lauren Lurkins. I would say that when I'm looking at the charge itself, it starts to actually say that exact thing at the end of bottom of page 1, top of page 3. EPA views that its pesticide program has done a good job of actually approving the pesticides for use by the agricultural community, but it says that the public does not understand the holistic approach, and it says the media and the courts tend to view our individual pesticide decisions in a one-off fashion. So it says that has left the American public uninformed on our science-based process, and I think it's because of each individual court challenge and ultimately court decision is then another media pop, but it never really gives credence to the process that went into a product, let alone a set of products, which we just heard Alex talk about. So in my mind, I think at a bare minimum, we should probably start with a FRRCC 101 for the crowd to at least understand. I'm sure there's a lot of knowledge in the crowd, but maybe there are some missing pieces where we can better as a committee understand the process that's undertaken by US EPA with regard to individual pesticide product registration and re-registration, and then also maybe unpackaging that second part of that paragraph at the top of page 2, which goes into like 5 other related topics that probably deserve their own 101 to be honest. But I mean, I guess I would start with just a very general, it's probably going to take some time, but some education from the EPA staffers who do that job for this committee.
I think that's an excellent point, Lauren, and ask them to give us a layman's version of this so that we can, if we can understand it, maybe the public could come closer to understanding it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good point.
As a part of that, this is Jeff Gore. You know, related to FIFRA and what Lauren was talking about is, you know, I think one thing that would be important is, has the EPA's evaluation or method of evaluation of pesticides changed over time? So is it different now than it was 30 years ago? Obviously, tools and techniques are better now than they were 30 years ago, but how has that changed the approval process for new pesticides?
Good question, Jeff. Excellent point. Are there any thoughts on water quality, water quantity? Dave Ross talked a lot about water availability, water reuse. Are there any questions that you have, information that you need around that topic?
This is Matt Freund, and I'm just curious about, he went over a lot of, a lot of territory in that, and I'm just curious about the digesters, and that's something that I have, how deep into the hole.
Matt, I can't hardly hear you. Can everybody else hear him okay?
No.
Is this any better?
It's very quiet.
That's better. Yeah, I'm sorry. I struggled to hear you.
Yeah, no, this is first time I talked, so I didn't know how close to the computer to get. But I'm very interested in how far into the depth of certain topics does this committee get into? For instance, on the digesters and the AgStar program and the fundings and that sort of thing. I just don't know how deep into the woods we get on certain topics.
We may have to divide the ad hoc committee into separate segments because they're just so broad. Just the nitrate work itself would just, could take 2 years. I mean, so I just think, we're going to have to figure out how we manage getting through some of those topics in the time allotment that we have.
Yeah, and I will throw out a caution. I've seen the committee get bogged down, and water quality is where it happens. And when you're talking about Gulf hypoxia and how do you monitor water quality and try to figure out where pollutants are coming from and that kind of thing, you can get so bogged down that you can spend 2 years on it and still not know where you've come from. So a caution that I have for the committee is that we don't go that far. We have to give meaningful recommendations, but at the same time, we've got to address the topics, and we can't maybe dig that deep into all the aspects. Matt, my thought on your question about anaerobic digesters and cost and funding sources and those kind of things. I think if that's germane to the recommendation, if those things are important for EPA to understand, that maybe that's a limitation why there's not more, or why maybe it's a technical limitation or something like that. I think absolutely we need to dig into that and make a meaningful recommendation. But trying to analyze exactly what method of nitrate testing is the most appropriate for runoff into the Mississippi River, we can get really bogged down.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to go back to our state of Connecticut is asking that exact question. Why don't we have more digesters? And I think that it's a very broad question that has a lot of answers to it. And I agree. Starting to figure out certain testing is going to get really problematic, but some of the broad reasons digesters don't happen, might be something that we can make some good recommendations on.
I think in that instance, talking about the economics is very, very germane to that discussion.
Yep, you have to have subsidies to make it work, so.
Hey, Tom, can I ask a question about process?
Yes, sir.
This is Charlie Santer. Yeah, so I'm trying to get an idea of what the process for us going through this will look like, and I think a few others have asked those kind of questions. So is the expectation that we have this charge right now, that we get through these by the end of the year, and then we move on to another set of charges, or each of these takes on their own life, and some can go 2 years? And then also, how can we add new areas into the charges? So I'm trying to get an idea of what this next year to 2 years looks like.
Charles, I think part of that will be answered by the administrator tomorrow, in that are there any of these topics that are especially time sensitive? In other words, does the agency need to hear from us by next March on pesticides, for example? I'm just throwing that out. And that will help me and us design a time frame. This is all as new to you as it is to me, and the charges were not actually finished until right before the meeting. So there's a lot of questions, and that's the whole purpose of our discussion today, is to get these kind of questions on the table. Now, I'll tell you, historically, some of the charge topics have taken 2 years to be fully developed. We've worked on them. When you only meet twice a year and you have ad hoc working groups, maybe working via conference call, or there has been in-person meetings, but that's not the norm. It doesn't move quite as fast as you might think it would. And so taking 2 years to develop some of these charge topics isn't out of the question.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Tom, this is Chris.
Bill, this is Bill again.
Bill, go ahead.
Well, just real quick to clarify that, Tom, what do you recommend as far as the topics, and how will we pick those topics for that meeting? Because, I mean, do we ask the administrator, or does he charge you and HEMA and our vice chair to, because, I mean, we've got this array of topics, but we really want to focus on the important one, but with 30 of us on this committee, that topic could vary across the country. Because we really need to utilize our time with the most important topic that needs to be addressed today or tomorrow or whatever. So I guess I'm trying to go along with Charles. How do we pick the topic?
And when you're saying the topic, are you talking about the questions that EPA included in the charge topics document? Because there's a lot of questions in here with each topic. Is that what you're asking, Bill?
Yeah, in a sense. Because
Okay.
we really need to, make our time, it's very valuable.
I guess I'm going to answer that this way, and I may be corrected, but I think it's up to us. And it will be up to the ad hoc working group to identify the things that's most important to us. EPA has given us a broad general topic here that they said we want to hear from you on. And so it's up to us to figure out what we believe is the most important information that the administrator and leadership at EPA needs us to hear from ag and rural communities. One of the things that we can do, this happened with the first FRRCC. after we established our ad hoc working groups, each ad hoc working group had a charge. And so the committee leadership working with the EPA leadership kind of narrowed the focus and gave a little more specificity to the topic that the ad hoc working group had to deal with. And that's something that we could do. If we believe that there's not enough focus or specificity in the questions, we can narrow that down a little bit. I think probably by the end of tomorrow, we'll have a pretty good feel for whether we can get our arms around this or whether we need to further refine the questions so that we have a focus.
I've got some more, this is Beth, I've got some more clarification questions.
Okay.
And, you know, maybe Carrie addressed these some, but since it was our first time seeing it, I certainly wasn't able to digest it all. At the end on page 4, these specifically, how can EPA coordinate, blah, blah, blah. So how can EPA better measure data and information regarding proactive measures that are taken? What is meant by better measure data and information? Is this, how can EPA track what's happening, what production ag is doing, what rural communities are doing, like what practices they're doing and what the impacts are on water quality, quantity, and food loss and food waste? Is that sort of like a impact tracking question?
I think that's exactly what that question is, Beth. And you know, so many of these things are done on a voluntary basis, and it's not within the purview of a permit or anything where EPA has any sense of how or maybe adoption rate of a conservation practice or you know, recycling water, those kinds of things. I think that's what EPA is asking, is how can we get a better grasp of adoption rate and how these things are being implemented in the country.
Okay, and then the next one, how can we better utilize or coordinate data from state, local, or federal level partners? If those are governmental partners, is how I'm interpreting it. Maybe that's totally wrong. Which data are it? Hema, I don't know if you know which data are being referred to here. I mean, again, is this water quality quantity data? Is this food loss and waste data? You know, post-harvest, post-consumer. Which data are these?
So I believe that question applies to both subcomponents of Charge B. But certainly it's a, if you're requesting further specificity about the meaning of that question, we can certainly address that tomorrow.
Well, just because it's hard to know how to use something if you don't know exactly what the data are that are being collected.
And Beth, that may be part of the answer. I know Lauren Lurkins has a specific example where states don't have data that maybe the federal government does.
Yeah.
Or there's probably a lot of states that have data that EPA doesn't have access to. I don't have the background on this question, but this is an age-old issue of how do we share this data, have access to everyone that needs to have access to it, as well as, you know, have appropriate protections around it.
Yeah.
So Tom, going back to what you were saying, I think this is what's going to happen when we break down into our individual ad hoc groups, you know, because like even on the water ad hoc group, you know, he's I forgot his name, I'm sorry, David was talking about, you know, the finance. we would need to know a little bit of background of that and who they're working with these public-private partnerships. So in order for us to move it forward, we need to know where they're at. So I think a lot of the questions are going to come after we break into the groups and start to digest the charge and figure out what direction we're going into, to figure out what additional resources we're going to need.
Right. Right. And that is something that we may need to bring in agency people. We may need to bring in academia. We may need to bring in different experts in different areas to help us understand some of the complexities to be able to give a good recommendation. And that can happen at the ad hoc working group level. It can happen at a, one of the main committee meetings. There'll be a lot of opportunities for us to request information and bring in people that are experts in various aspects of each one of these topics. But you just raised that's a very appropriate one, that we've got to understand that better to understand what the limitations are and how to advise.
And we're not going to know until we get into it. So back to, I'm sorry, the lady before me, I think that's the same thing, what she's asking is what they're analyzing. It's like, we're going to, as we go through it, we're going to be needing more and more stuff. So, yeah.
Hey, Tom, this is Lauren Lurkins. I would say, I feel like there's just a lot here, like I think we're all kind of saying, but if people have all night to look at really the words on the page, I think that's pretty important. I mean, when I look at the first one, is maybe it's not an easy one, but it's a clear statement of maybe where we need to focus. But the second charge is got multi-part, pieces to kind of dissect. But what I see there quite a bit, if you really are looking at the words, there's quite a bit on nutrient management, nutrient pollution in a couple different ways. And listening to what David said, I think at a minimum, we should probably be looking at that. When I look at those first two bullets in that lens, I am only really seeing them talk about what EPA can do with data from outside entities, production, agriculture, rural communities, and then also their partners. So in my mind, I'm seeing them looking at the data that comes to the federal government. I would love to kind of unpackage what David was saying with regard to the hypoxia task force, because as someone who works on these issues out in the Midwest, that is something that we do pay close attention to, what the hypoxia task force is doing. And not everyone in our state through multiple administrations or even agency staff is. And so I think if we had a better indication from him or his staff of, really what is the Gulf Hypoxia Task Force looking at, and how EPA is currently gathering information from a bunch of different ways, I think that would be a good start there to unpackage. But to me, I do think they want us to look at a couple different pieces on nutrients.
Thank you, Lauren.
And Tom, this is Barry Bird.
Yes, sir.
And Lauren, you bring up a good point there. When I was listening to what you first had to say about the different charges here and how they're broken out, specifically with the water quality and water quantity stuff, I'm more versed in that than the other points or the other charges, but I see that as an opportunity to where the different bullets they have broken out, they kind of play on one another, it seems. So when you try to figure out how to develop or how to combat or work on getting answers or solutions to those problems, once you do one, it starts a domino effect, and it seems like it'll start knocking into the next one. overseeing regulatory programs, collaborative approaches. Once you get the answers for one, it gives you part of the answer or most of the answer for the next one. Some of them are unrelated, but a lot of them are related, it seems. And from what I do, or what I've been doing for the last 20 plus years, I'm excited because a lot of this seems like a roadmap has already been drawn out. I don't have to come up with new things to go look for answers to. It's all there. I'm surprised that EPA has come up with this charge and has broken it out into so many different categories or steps, because it is a challenge, and I do see a challenge there. But I really, since I'm familiar with it, I don't see it as something that can't be taken on in a period of time, or the period of time that this committee is going to be working on it. It looks scary, I agree, but I just wanted to kind of set your mind at ease, because I have so many ideas and so many questions about this type of stuff that I really want to get them out there and start digging into it already. But as Tom pointed to, this is today. we gotta, pull back on the reins and really figure out what we need to do here, and then take it on as a long-term type of problem that we have to come up with real solutions. And so I guess if that kind of puts your mind at ease about some of this stuff, I see that it is difficult, but I believe that with the expertise we got here and the different ideas and all the questions that have been asked so far, that I think we'll have a good time working on this, and I think we might be able to tackle it.
And maybe I should apologize to the committee, because I was insistent that they give us a charge that was substantive and we could get passionate about and really engage, and it feels like they did that. They gave us they gave us an elephant.
That's good.
Yes, sir. We are right at our breaking point. Are there any other comments? We haven't had any discussion on food waste. Is there any burning question that anyone has on that topic?
Tom, this is Hema. I can make my wrap up quite brief, so if you want to take a few extra minutes to get into the food waste topic before we adjourn, please go ahead, and I can just do wrap up in less than just a couple minutes. So okay. No worries.
Thanks, Hema. I'm gonna have to get better at time management.
Hey, Tom.
No, it was a short session.
Hey, this is Lauren Lurkins again. Before we move on to the specific topic, I just wanted to also say, thinking about Bruce Roden's presentation on R&D, I do, and I'm sure a lot of people on the committee see a lot of the press releases that come out of EPA talking about the different challenges and the different grant opportunities. I guess my thought is that's probably a really good opportunity to invite him and his team in to talk to the committees, the ad hoc, whichever subset of our group, so that way we can kind of know, okay, beyond the award, what is the office finding and what data is available to us, and maybe Hema can help us with that on our big picture topics. What is the universe of scientific applied research that is within the walls of EPA that we can use to better inform our work?
That's a great point. Really good point, Lauren. All right.
Sorry, just to clarify, Lauren, was that question in reference to just the food waste topic or all of them?
No, I was just wanting to make that kind of broad statement before we focused on food waste. I think from what I heard, there's probably work that could be surfaced out of his group on all of our major topics.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, any specific thoughts on food waste? food loss. I think one of the things here, and EPA hasn't put sideboards on this charge, but one of the things that we need to focus on is ag ways that agriculture reduces food waste by using a lot of food and feed for livestock feed. A lot of byproducts that would otherwise go to the landfill are used for livestock feed. Distillers grains is a great example of that. Corn steep, milk whey, a lot of those products that would otherwise be waste products are being utilized as livestock feed today. Are there ways that we can enhance that? Are there byproducts that are not being utilized that we can enhance? And I don't think by any means this topic is limited to that discussion, but I think it certainly needs to include that.
I agree. Out here with the drought, we've had to use a lot of our calls to feed our livestock when there was no food in the hills to feed them. And I think, a lot of our fruit growers, they've tried to run marketing programs around ugly fruit to get people to buy the grades, a different grade than what they're used to seeing in the grocery store. So there's a lot of those efforts going on. It's just, also getting the acceptance by the consumers, to do that, to do that. So we have to figure out how. That's on us to figure that out. But no, the other problem too is, there has to be management around the use of the food. The county I lived in was Ventura. We used a lot of lemons. Actually, cows eat lemons. That was amazing to me. But when you get too many and you have an urban interface issues, you get a lot of flies. So, there's lots of issues that go around food management that we would have to address. And so I'm glad they haven't put walls around it, but I think it's one of the things when you start digging into it, there's going to be more to it than it appears on the surface, I think.
This is Matt, and some of the issues with food waste, we might want to try to get some information from people that are working on Hunger Task Force and such. There's a lot of other agencies and places where we can go to try to get some information that would be meaningful from other groups that would help this group to do a better job.
Good idea, Matt. That could be an example of maybe how a program that's working that we might need to hear from and see what they did.
Yeah, excuse me, Tom. This is Barry again.
Yes, sir.
I have a question actually on the food thing for someone that on the committee that may know, Jeanette or anybody else. The food waste portion that was discussed or talked about with wasting food and stuff in the incinerators and landfills, is that all food, or is that also related to our plastic packaging of those goods and styrofoam and waste like that food gets packaged with nowadays? That gets thrown away with it.
I know in our particular instance, this is Matt again, with digestion, food waste comes with a lot of garbage, and that's a real problem, and they can't do a good job of separating that out. So I believe that that's part and parcel to food waste when you get it down to that level. When you're incinerating it, there's a lot of other products that go into the incinerator, as well as the digesters, which also brings in a whole list of problems that EPA would be interested in for nutrient management.
Yeah, yep, that's what I was thinking, Matt. You're gonna have a whole nother set of issues to deal with when you bring in the foreign material.
And it seems like that may be, yeah, thanks, Matt, for that information. It seems like that would be a whole another subset in that talk of the packaging and all the extra stuff that gets thrown away with that food, and what to do with that. And I think I've read some things recently about the recycle issues and that whole recycle story from when it started back in the, I don't know, 80s. And I see that becoming a big issue, and that might be a part of the solution is both of those things. So I just wanted to kind of get an idea of that. Thank you.
You bet. And I don't have the answer. I suspect that Matt's probably right, but we can get the answer to that question. Does the tonnage include the foreign material?
Hey, Tom.
Other questions? Go ahead.
It's Lauren Lurkins again. I really don't know a ton about the topic other than the disruptions that came because of COVID. And I remember someone making a comment earlier on today about, is this COVID or is this normal? And Carrie saying it was sort of a two-parter. But when I'm looking at the document for the charge on page 3, it talks about a interagency strategy that was unveiled in 2020. EPA, USDA, and FDA, and there might be folks on this group that know the details of that strategy, but this may be one where, frankly, the full committee could benefit from an overarching discussion about that strategy, what it says, and how we can learn from that and fold in whether it's post-COVID or just normal life if we ever get to that point. So that would be my suggestion, unpackaging that strategy.
Tom, one question for you.
Yes, sir.
With the cattle feeding, I suppose you would have some correspondence with other producers that feed hogs and the other animals, but do you know of anybody that uses, for instance, outdated bakery goods to feed their animals? I know a producer in Minnesota that the Hostess company up in the Twin Cities, when they have a whole bunch of extra outdated Ho-Hos, Twinkies, you name it, he goes up and gets semi-loads and feeds them to the hogs. And when they feed them, they put them in the grinder and grind all that stuff up and feed them to the hogs so that food isn't wasted. But I don't know if you ever heard anything like that, or.
I have. I've heard of a lot about bakery waste being fed to livestock. Bad batch of beer gets fed to livestock. Part of the challenge is having enough of a big enough quantity that you can feed it right. You've got to.
Sure.
You don't just go give them a whole bunch of Twinkies today and then that's over. We'll have a lot of issues tomorrow, but no, if there's a way to take a waste stream like that and make it a steady stream over time, I think that's definitely something that we need to think about.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Tom, this is Nick McCarthy. I'll jump on the comments there and just tell you on two sides we've tried to spearhead some of those things with food waste. One large struggle or things we'll need help with is logistics play a huge part into this. And a lot of times where our food waste is at is not where our livestock or our needs for for this type of disposal is at. So I think an approach or a thought needs to be is somehow some support on logistics to be able to do that. We've also seen this on the fertilizer side of things. We've done some test projects at CVA with some food waste that's been composted to make fertilizer, particularly out of the Disney company's theme parks. And it also boils down to a logistical play comparative to traditional resources that ends up getting us in trouble and a lot of times kills the project just because it's not economical and not scalable. So just a couple comments on that. The food waste thing is very interesting, but a lot of times it's too far away from what we deal with on the farms and ranches. So just some comments I had.
Freight becomes a big issue on a lot of things. You can't freight water very far.
So this is Hema. I just wanted to chime in here. We're at 4:29 Eastern, so I wanted to make sure that we have a moment to adjourn before and just a very quick wrap up before the link ends for today. So Tom, is that all right if I move to wrap up real quick?
Yes. Go ahead.
I'll keep it very short. So all I wanted to say was, first of all, thank you to everyone who bared with you know, all of the technical aspects of trying to host a virtual national meeting in this way with public participation as well. Also a thank you to all of the public that joined us today. Today, you know, as you saw, it was a very thick agenda. Tomorrow, we're going to have quite a bit of time for the committee to continue discussion about the charge, about their questions, for EPA to respond to questions, and also for the administrator to address the committee. It will be a shorter day. It'll be from 11 a.m. Eastern to 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern only. So with just one break from 1 to 1:30 Eastern in the middle of the day. There will be a new link for tomorrow, as you all navigated today, the multiple link situation, but for tomorrow, there's just one link for the whole day. So just go about logging in the way that you got through today. So I'm just gonna leave it at that, and we'll, you know, I'll turn it back to you, Tom, to adjourn the meeting. And then we can reconvene tomorrow at 11.
All right. Thank you, Hema. Thank you to everyone for sticking with it and participating today. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
This is Beth Sauer. Have to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Beth. Is there a second?
This is Jeanette Lombardo. I'll second.
Thank you, Jeanette. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, and we'll see you in the morning at 11 o'clock Eastern.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.